Hey.
Good evening, everyone. So we just had Shamrat, finished with Shamrat telling us about his 25 years of being in Auroville, and before that in the ashram school, his feelings and the crisis that he sees Auroville is into. Uh, Welcome, Henrik. Henrik and I first met in a organizational restructuring in group uh, on as a part of the residents assembly. We were those times, even I could think of sitting and participating. Okay, let's participate and let's talk about organization and what we thought um, in such a meeting about 4 or 5 years ago. Me and Henrik first met. uh, Anyways, I will quickly introduce Henrik, and then I'll pass on the mic to Henrik for his very important talk. How can a collective wisdom go beyond polarization and tyranny of the majority? Henrik Dutz is an architect with a professional experience at Archicult and Jäcklein Architekten. Please excuse my pronunciation, Henrik.
No
Since
problem.
2019, he has worked in Auroville as a volunteer with Raman Constructions and Studio uh, Archology, where he focuses on sustainable and holistic architecture involving rammed earth and vaulted masonry. His practice is informed by integral philosophy and complemented by his interest in yoga, meditation, and playing bass guitar. Yeah, over to you, Henrik. Please introduce your uh, talk and carry on.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. For me, it was something where I felt okay. If someone would give me the platform to talk about my ideas about Auroville, I should take it. At the same time, I'm also not very used to cameras and speaking in public in this manner. So please excuse my nervousness. And also my role speaking here. I mean, I'm just a newcomer in Auroville. I came to Auroville first time 2018, joined in 21. And under the current circumstances, I didn't really see that many opportunities for myself to actually do something substantial for the collective. So to say too much from my position about Auroville feels sometimes a little hypocritical in a way. In any case, I was part of several of these groups. First time where we met, that was, I think, the first iteration of 3 different groups that tried to come up with new ideas for what could be changed with the Auroville system and what improvements could be made. I learned a lot in these groups, and it was a very interesting experience for me. At the same time, not much came out of these groups, and of course, the political circumstances are a big reason for that. And so I see these times under these political circumstances also as a time to learn, to reflect, and to try to see where things could go if things open up again. And I myself am quite influenced by Ken Wilber's integral theory, and through which I also got to know about Sri Aurobindo, eventually Auroville, which led me here. And I read in 2016 a book that Ken Wilber introduced within. He wrote the introduction for it. It's called Crowdocracy. And for me, back in 2016, when I read this book, I was not thinking about coming to Auroville, but it blew my mind nevertheless, even though I didn't see how this could be the future governance anytime soon for any system that I would partake in. And this book kind of led me down a rabbit hole, crowdocracy. So like, where could governance develop into? What is the history of development of governance and systems thinking? And even though I'm still quite inspired by this book, I don't want to talk too much about crowdocracy today. I want to talk more about kind of the insights that it gave me, and also kind of what my learning is from being part of these different groups, and where I felt there are certain mental conceptions about how things should be, and which maybe are kind of roadblocks in a way to new ways of going forward. I can just share my screen.
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. So, how's this working? I don't see myself now, but that's not important. Okay. Yeah, in the abstract to this talk, I was talking about legitimacy, and I think it's still an important word to frame my ideas around this, but let's see. Most people are anyway kind of aware how basic history, where we came from, tribal societies, which then developed into monarchies and bigger state conglomerates, and these monarchies developing bureaucracies, and eventually in the more developed countries into democracies. And to understand how these like, what is the main trajectory through this history? One thing that we can see is that in the small tribal societies, the leadership came mostly from the elders or some chief, but there are also other examples of the more egalitarian tribes. But in terms of governance, the chief or the elders is what led directly to the development of monarchies. And in the monarchy, you don't just have a chief, but you have different families that consolidate power. You have maybe even a king and a queen, and you have an aristocracy that kind of is a sounding board for the king. So there's already a bigger sharing of power. And with the advent of modernity, the divine rule of kings, of course, was questioned. Okay, what actually justifies power? And in modernity, different ideas developed of like what actually does justify power. And one version is what we see today, for example, in China, is if a bureaucracy is, or just a leading party with no actual vote, if this bureaucracy is able to give order to society and provide living standards to the citizens, this kind of governance can be stable enough to rule over long times, even without too much suppression of the peoples. But the big idea that went beyond that is democracy, and that we don't have just a few select people. We don't just have some elite of specialized, competent people, but everyone can select leaders or representatives. And first it was just the men of the aristocracy, and then women, and then also minorities. So the vote got more distributed. And in this trajectory, it feels like a kind of a very natural expectation that what we actually want is even more equality and participation of everyone who is involved in whatever matter. And so the sovereignty of the individual is becoming greater and greater in this evolutionary trajectory. And then looking forward to these future visions like divine anarchy, then even the state is supposed to get out of the way. And it would be the free collaboration of individuals that organize things fluidly and appropriate to the circumstance. And we are kind of in this in between period where we have these experiments like Auroville already since '68 of having a more basic democratic, everyone has a voice. And from what I understand, there was also a development where in the beginnings stronger voices would dominate the discourse, and then things would get more orderly and more facilitation, and it would be easier for everyone to get heard and be part of the process. And at the same time, this development maybe wasn't fast enough to kind of cope with the events of the last years to basically be able to prove enough that we can govern ourselves in a way that can create progress in a way that is hard to remain unacknowledged. And at the same time, just as we heard from the previous presenters, it's like to say that is always also a little hurtful, and it feels inappropriate when you see that what was achieved over the last 50 years. But what could still be said is that the ability of the democratic process, how it was functioning till the RA got undermined, was maybe not the most effective, and the ability to process enough decisions to kind of have to give everyone a feeling that we're doing something worthwhile here. There was sometimes I got the feeling like a meeting fatigue and such things. Yeah, I just want to go one step back. I think what is one polarity that is really at the heart of this whole negotiation of power in a reasoned and a modern society is kind of the polarity of equality and excellence, and these are kind of two competing factors that give legitimacy to who's supposed to have a say. And this is also a discussion that I hear playing out quite a bit. So it's actually two principles that developed from modernity. One is the meritocratic principle, and the other is the universal rights of the subject that has ultimate worth beyond any outer measuring of this value. And both elements of the modern system, the bureaucracy and the voting rights, represent these two polarities. And this polarity is not going away, even though we are kind of unhappy with both versions of it. Like one would be the bureaucracy, the meritocracy that tends towards authoritarianism, and the equality that tries to make it right for everyone, and then makes everything slow and ineffective. But what a lot of political theorists are talking about is how this polarity gets negotiated. And in Auroville, we have the RA, which is the equality, everyone takes part, and then we select working groups. And at the same time, there's still also, I hear this discussion in Auroville about an idea that Mother brought up at some point about the 7 wise people, and like the question, okay, what does this idea mean for Auroville of like a hierarchy of consciousness, a hierarchy of the more evolved or more intuitive, and at the same time the postmodern values of equality, which even tends towards consensus and like where everyone should be part of the decision. And maybe one thing that I also want to add to the idea of like the 7 whys or whatever. In a way, this is already the case. I mean, we select a working committee of 7 people, and this is what the collective wisdom can come up with, and who the collective esteems as the most appropriate for the job. And so then there's the question: okay, is there maybe some other way to find out who is actually the most legitimate for such a role in the community? But it gets really complicated. Like and I myself didn't come across any idea that goes beyond just selecting representatives that is seems functional at this point in time. And on the other end of the spectrum, with consensus, there's yeah, the known problem of a slow process, and what I found interesting about the research around consensus is that if you want unanimous consensus in larger groups beyond 150 people, for example, this is actually something that is quite unhealthy because it signals a form of groupthink and to make everyone align so closely to one decision means that there's some kind of force, group pressure as part of the process, and then the whole discussion is, in these groups is, okay, but we want to go beyond democracy and the majority vote, and sometimes in these discussions in these groups there was even the feeling for the need to get rid of voting fully, and I found this always a pretty dangerous idea, because even though our modern democracies are not the greatest examples of a good process, to me, my feeling is that the vote is kind of something like a safety mechanism for a system to give it this basic legitimacy, and that this kind of basic security should stay in a system to prevent regression into authoritarian structures. And I think what is really noteworthy about ideas like crowdocracy is that it kind of takes all these elements of decision making of previous structures and puts it in a new order, and integrates these different parts in a new way. Just to give a quick overview about the different kinds of decisions that are usually made. So consensus we talked about, majority rule is what normal democracies do, and then we have two new forms emerging out of kind of the new teal business forms like sociocracy and holacracy, called the advice process and the consent-based decision making, and then we have the old like how modern companies work, like expert delegation, and the advice process is a little closer to expert delegation, but there's the individual is asked to consult the group in any decision, and consent-based is somewhere between that advice process and majority rule. Not asking for everyone to agree, but to consent that there's no harm seen in the decision taken. So just to show that there's kind of this spectrum of the whole group deciding together, and then the single individual taking up the responsibility. And like one way these different forms of decision making can be integrated is if you have a process, even in Auroville, we have actually petitioning, and so everyone can come up with a petition, and so this is not just getting a representative, but you actually can give the inputs to the policy making process. And for me, with that, there's actually the main issue in Auroville, that how it's working right now, I feel it's maybe too much dependent on personal social capital, and there's no good, like these platforms that were emerging over the last 15 years or so, like change.org. where there's a where there's an algorithm that picks up what kind of ideas get traction faster, and then they get promoted. And so there's actually a feedback mechanism that shows people, okay, here is something that could work, and more people tend to like it. And yeah, I think I'm struggling here a little with this petitioning ability,
Yes.
but without a good ranking mechanism. And are you still there? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, what do you think? How much more time can I take?
You have time. You have time. You have
Okay.
time.
That I think would be really like an improvement if we would use such technology to kind of give more access to presenting your ideas in a functional way, that these ideas can actually come up through such an algorithm. What I went on to say is that what I already really was happy to see in the development over the last years, and that the petitioners actively reach out for feedback, and through the different meetings try to incorporate the feedback and improve the proposal in that way. What I would just hope as maybe an improvement for the RAD process is to kind of don't leave that too much up to the petitioners, but make it more as part of the process. And then again, we can use internet platforms like how can we get more feedback? And this is, I feel, where the idea of consensus comes in a way, that it's that consensus comes in a way that it's that everyone's voice can actually be part of a proposal in a way. And it come to also kind of a quite important idea to me. Like comparing these new models of organization like crowdocracy, holocracy, and crowdocracy, or there's this book Reinventing Organizations, which was the bestseller in business development and all these things. A pattern that seems to be emerging is that it's not so much that the people who seem like the wisest in a company, or the more experienced, that they tell others what to do, but that they step more into a kind of role of the advisor or the facilitator. And this is a little bit my alternative to this idea of the 7 wise people, or something that it's if there are people who are really wiser than the rest, then it's, I think, more like sometimes, of course, the input of the wisest, whoever that is very much of value to the community, but it is if you see the political process or the decision-making process of community, it's not just, okay, we decide what needs doing, but this is a collective learning process, and we all try to understand this collective organism together. And whoever would be the, in quotes, wisest should maybe be more than in a position of facilitating this process, kind of trying to create an environment where learning can happen, where feedback processes are actually happening, and people can learn. their mistakes, from like how a policy gets implemented and then needs to adapt, and this is generally also one of the things that even with conventional democracies where you see them struggling is adapting quickly, even in COVID and so on and so forth. That the evolution of governance and organization is towards a more like cybernetic system where you have much faster and more direct feedback loops, and this is also what kind of bridges the polarity of the person with expertise, which would be usually a person in a working group executing, or in some other part of the organization, and the feedback of the people that are actually affected, and that this feedback loop should be as integrated and close and as much in real time as possible. So this is like the first idea is, okay, who is really wise in terms of the collective processes. These people should not tell others what to do, but actually try to curate the learning experience. And then one is the integration of all the individuals with the people of expertise through a very direct feedback loops. And yeah, this also brings me to one point that I try to kind of promote in these groups again and again, is the idea of a division of powers, a separation of powers, which is also here written on the slide. And there's always the question of, in these discussions, okay, this is modern democracies, but we are trying to do something new here. And interestingly enough, for executing policy, not for coming up with policy. And then also, it also comes up how individuals in the community come up with ideas. And there it's really everyone can. And maybe some people can come up with more ideas and then benefit the community in that way. But I really like this vision of the egalitarian equality of we are all equal subjects, and at the same time people can come out of this horizontal plane, make their contribution, and fall back into the collective. And in a way, with the 2-year cycles of the working group members, this is also an idea which is already somewhat present in the current organization. There's one last idea that I want to talk about, and there's kind of how this meritocratic principle can be seen in two ways, like sometimes with some kind of authority figures that sometimes seem to be in the position that they have to do the dirty job of pressing some legislation through and do the unpopular thing, and which is kind of this parent-child relationship. And then if we treat each other as adults, then the idea should be more maybe like the more integrative and high-minded and integral policy or idea or proposal is, it should actually get very high to pleasing, but if you one is coming from and you see how these things can fit together, then this for me an actual sign of. And there's actually principles that these researchers came to written down here. Everyone can and should be encouraged to participate. No crowd delegation, semi-anonymity, basic rules layout in a constitution integrative process. And it's really how the collective and allow ourselves of people using their superiority. If you didn't pass the test, you have no business. Part of the truth and the best synthetic ideas come out of the process that are possible at that moment, and reiterative feedback processes, all that. Maybe one last thing I also want to mention, which I'm really interested in. So I mostly talked about kind of the system side of things and to kind of how to order these different principles, like the legislative, executive, judiciary, or what's the relationship between competence and expertise versus the universal rights of each citizen. This is more like all this outer perspective on it, but I think what I find really interesting on a cultural and interpersonal development is these group practices where we actually cultivate perspective taking, and it's called higher we practices, or where.
What is it called?
Higher we, like if we are in a conversation and where we are really in you, and this is kind of the most precious time, because we have so much attention, so many eyeballs in one room sharing this moment, and this time should be used wisely, and and there is some wisdom already around this in Auroville, where you feel, okay, if someone talks too long in a meeting, then you feel the pressure of the collective. And but I think there's surely more ways, like how can there be more back and forth, like these fishbowl discussions, or how can people go into smaller groups and then come back to the collective, and to honor even more how sacred and valuable this collective time is.
Yeah, but particularly what happens at times is this practice thing that you are talking about is very, very important. Even if the circumstances are conducive or not, the practice should remain, and of this perspective taking and one's ability to express itself. And then, as you rightly said, that we may have to adapt to new technologies, which are far more democratic in their designs. We do not perform there because we always manipulate the walls and the rooms. There are actually no rooms, there are actually no walls, but it is self-manufactured for control, and we have to try out various ways of such synthesis to happen, even if they do not kind of materialize eventually. But certainly that is something which I personally feel is very, very important, um, because it also results in a personal void, and then one gives up. In my personal case, I can say that after 4 or 5 years, in the past 2 3 years, No, I have nothing to do with it. But we need to participate, and we have to figure out how and to follow things, how to participate better, how to have perspective, how to respect other perspectives, and then figure out systems of synthesis, for which obviously we look up to more powerful structures and institutions, but they might fail, and that is what is the thing. Maybe people who are otherwise not necessarily institutions and power structures who can do this synthesis will have to put a little more effort to figure out how uh, that can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Henrik, for taking us through this reading of yours and your um, understanding of how Auroville functioning and its difficulties. Monica, you have any questions? What do you think?
Yes, thank you so much, Henrik. I was wondering if you had the opportunity to change any one function in order to support the growth of Auroville, what would you like to change about its governance?
Mhm. Well, um, it's a hard question because um, a lot of these elements kind of depend on each other to work in such a system. At the same time, I think a very easy thing that can be done is just creating a functional petitioning platform. And another thing is these more groups that try to actually see, okay, how can we actually do sense making together? These are things that can be done right away. A lot of the other things don't make much sense before Auroville doesn't have control over its finances, or the RA doesn't have control over its finances. Um, and at least part of the city planning. So I think the idea of the division of powers is quite a big one, because that was also, I think, something that was a big problem in the Auroville system, that decisions were made, but then who actually checks implementation? And then if something doesn't get implemented, funds misused or not used or whatever, who's actually checking and are there consequences? So, and this is like where there, like groups like Auroville Council is actually not really put into the position of checking other groups and individuals, and then where are the consequences? Like, so the system didn't have teeth, if you will, and which kind of yeah, which opened it up to abuse and misuse. But for me, the separation of powers things, that's a big one. But I feel it's a very important idea, and that's why I use this chance to promote it and try to at least make it a point of contention if someone sees this video. Yeah, that's how much I would say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your response. And what you said about petitions also is something that I feel inspired by, and I really do hope that the petitions that we have going around sometimes do get the chance to take effect also.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me and giving me this opportunity. All right.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Henrik. Thank you very much. We hope that we we means we. There is no, there is no virtual we. There is no.
Yeah.
We have to, at some point of time, come together and do it at whatever scale possible.
Yeah.
And yes, and that is the mechanism of this checks and balances that we practice and inculcate in the culture of perspective building and petitioning, and that has to be done probably through schools, itself, to be able to respect the institutions. I think needs to be able to take perspectives, which was a crisis before, and obviously it manifested in its worst form now. Okay, thank you so much, Henrik. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
very much. See you
Bye
soon.
bye.
Thank you, Monica.
Bye bye.